Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
The federal government announced more funding today to help with harm reduction within many of our Indigenous communities. Alberta's Deputy Premier says amendments may be needed to clear up any confusion over the recently introduced Alberta Sovereignty Act. And a creative new exhibit at the Galt Museum in Lethbridge showcases how sound has had such a huge impact on our lives.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The official opposition deputy leader blasted the Trudeau Liberals during question period today on their financial record. Jasraj Singh Halan, the MP for Calgary Forest Lawn, says the Liberal spending policies are creating a lot of hardships for Canadians.
The Governor of the Bank of Canada has confirmed if the Liberals' deficit was lower, inflation would have been lower today. The enormous deficit is going to cost each and every Canadian an extra $3,500. Less money for food, less money for gas, less money to heat their homes. When will the Liberals understand that their failed policies and enormous deficits are causing continuous pain on Canadians?
I've said it before and I'll say it again. We have the lowest deficit and the lowest debt among all countries in the G7. But of course, these are challenging times. We see that global inflation and the global economic instability is affecting Canadians, and that's why we've put forward a solid and responsible plan to help them. This morning, as I do every morning, and as members of this government do all of the time, I checked the numbers, and the new labour force survey came out, Madam Speaker. Over 50,000 full-time jobs were created in November alone in this country.
Ottawa announced that close to $10 million in federal funding will be going towards 16 projects aimed at helping Indigenous communities across Canada to reduce harms related to substance abuse. Minister of Health and Addictions Carolyn Bennett says compassionate harm reduction help is needed right now.
It is imperative that we work to replace judgment and disdain with compassion and respect. You know, last week in National Addiction Awareness Week, the theme was a community of caring. Like we actually have to understand that every single Canadian has a role to play, and I think just coming back down into downtown Toronto, that when you see someone who's intoxicated, and ask what's the matter with them, you have to know you're asking the wrong question. The question is what happened to them. And that's why dealing with trauma informed and the effects of colonization, we have to have everybody aware.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in British Columbia speaking about the ongoing drug crisis facing so many here in our country. The BC coroner's report showed that 179 British Columbians died in October of drug poisonings. BC Ambulance also responded to more than 35,000 calls last year. Trudeau was asked if he's working with BC Premier David Eby to address the ongoing drug crisis.
I had a good conversation about it with the Premier just now, but we're also working very, very closely through our ministers and appropriate officials to continue to move forward to counter this horrific opioid epidemic and drug poisoning epidemic that is facing people not just in vulnerable communities, but in suburban and large and small cities across the province and across the country. We know that anchoring ourselves in science and data, making sure that issues of harm reduction, safe consumption are put to the forefront. We were happy to move forward with BC in landmark steps on drug supply just a number of months ago, but we know there's much more to do, and we will continue to work hand in hand with the province on leading in making sure that people are kept safe.
The UCP say amendments may be needed to clear up confusion over a bill that grants the province unfettered power outside of the legislature to rewrite laws and direct agencies to resist federal rules. Deputy Premier Casey Meadu says, however, his reading of Alberta Sovereignty Act is that Premier Daniel Smith and her inner circle do not have such power. Political scientists in the opposition NDP disagree and say it is dangerous to democracy. Business groups, including the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, warn this legal uncertainty is not good for business or investment. You know, there's been a lot of reaction to Premier Daniel Smith introducing Bill 1 at the legislature, the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. Dave Naylor, editor of the Western Standard, explains in more detail what kind of powers this potential new legislation would give the governing UCP.
Well, they can basically say no to any perceived federal law that would harm Alberta in some way. Right off the top of your head, you can think of the gun laws, the anti-pipeline laws, the anti-tanker laws. All those things would then come under this Sovereignty Act, I guess, where the cabinet would decide, okay, we're going to fight it, and how they're going to fight it. If the Trudeau government introduces new fertilizer rules, for example, for farmers, that would be an exceptional case to try and block it using these new powers. So, it's I don't think there's any doubt it will be used soon, and it's going to end up in court, and a lot of lawyers are going to get very rich before we figure out how it all falls out.
Now, Bill 1 is still being debated on and is yet to pass at the legislature. Alberta's opposition leader, Rachel Notley, says our province's healthcare system needs fixing right away. She says wait times in emergency rooms are increasing and Albertans are waiting far too long for ambulances. She also says far too many essential surgeries have been delayed.
An Albertan should be able to expect an ambulance in a matter of minutes, access an emergency room within a few hours, and see their family doctor in a day or two. But that's not happening right now. And the government must be held accountable to fix this problem.
Well, it was another cold one in Lethbridge today, but fortunately, a Chinook may be on the way. Angela Stewart is out in the field once again and has an early peek at the forecast now. Angela, the mercury should be climbing by quite a bit just in time for the weekend.
Yes, warmer temperatures are on the way. Saturday shaping up beautifully. Our high 0 and mainly sunny skies. A great day to maybe get outside, go for a walk, take the dog for a walk, just anything to kind of enjoy that sunshine while we still have it. Tonight, though, there is a risk of frostbite as we are still seeing that cold front over our region. That wind chill making it feel more like -31 with our low sitting at -21. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Angela. The Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services welcomed 2 new graduates. A graduation ceremony was held earlier today for the new recruits after completing a 12-week training program. Zachary Jan says it's taken a long time to get to this point, but graduating and becoming a part of the department feels pretty amazing.
Super excited with Lethbridge. They've been nothing but a welcoming family per se. It's no joke when they say the fire family. It's a second family. So really excited, and the process has been tough, but the work's really paid off, and now a new set of work starts.
Mitch Fowler, who led the recruits during their training, says it feels very rewarding to have been able to train them and to now see them transition into their new careers.
Seeing them transition from where they were when we kind of first started to where they are now, their skills, knowledge, and just general overall kind of aptitude. It's nice to. It's always, like I said, it's just very rewarding. You get to know them super well, and in the end game of things, it makes this whole department much better.
Some seriously nice mustaches, too. By the way, Fowler says some of the graduates will be on the job beginning tomorrow. Lethbridge College opened the doors to a new 60,000 square foot greenhouse research facility in Brooks. This is all part of a project between college researchers and Sonterra Greenhouse. Megan Shapka with the college explains what the project is really all about.
We can test things like different lighting prescriptions. We can test varieties, so what type of tomatoes they might grow, what type of strawberries might grow, and do that in Alberta-based conditions. So the research that we're doing is really important for the decisions that they're going to make in their business operation. The greenhouse industry in Alberta, we believe, is really set to boom. Like, yes, there are a few big operations, but we don't have a significant amount of greenhouse-grown vegetables. It's about 200, 300 acres in Alberta, compared to 3,000 acres in Ontario. So continuing to explore what is best for Alberta is really important.
Through the collaboration, trials have begun on strawberries and tomatoes at the facility. A senior researcher with the college explains how they're trying to make production more sustainable.
this is a state-of-the-art facility, and we are using a scientific methodology in order to understand the effect of the factors we are studying, such as, for example, crop density, or a type of greenhouse, or varieties, and so on and so forth. All those questions are very, very important for the industry in order to stay more profitable, in order to be more economically sustainable.
By the way, the college took on management of the greenhouse from the government of Alberta back in October of 2020. Sound is a vital aspect of our everyday lives that we sometimes take for granted. A new exhibition at the Galt Museum and Archives called The Politics of Sound looks to answer the question of how do our ears control our actions. Video journalist Micah Quinn has that story.
The Politics of Sound exhibition is meant to make visitors think about how sound influences their day-to-day actions. That's according to Tyler Stewart, the curator for the Galt Museum and Archives.
When we move around in the world every day, we're surrounded by sound, but we often don't really pay attention a lot to it because we're kind of dominated by visual culture in Western society. Overall, the exhibition is a blend of both contemporary sound artworks, but historical artifacts from the collection as well, which point to how sound has been used within the local context, within the community here in Lethbridge, by things like school bells, but also by how authority figures like the police or fire departments use sound to kind of influence citizen behaviors as well.
Also on display is artwork finely crafted by Pascal Lasserre, who is a sculptor from British Columbia.
His series of sculptures here are really thinking about how music can be a positive force, but it also can be used for negative reasons as well. Thinking about things like how national anthems or how the military uses music in a different way to kind of rally people towards sometimes questionable aims, in contrast to, how we might use music to soothe ourselves as well.
Margie Kropp-Eardwolf began work on her piece of the exhibition in 2017. She says her art is an exploration into learning her traditional languages, which includes pieces of artwork and videos to interact with. She says many First Nation languages were put in jeopardy of being lost in Canada due to residential schools.
There's so many people now that are working towards safeguarding the languages for future generations, and so a lot of them have taken on developing dictionaries or online resources.
The Politics of Sound exhibition will be on display at the Galt Museum and Archives until May 7th of 2023. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Many of us enjoy curling up with a good book. Some of us may even consider putting pen to paper with story ideas that we have. One local author, Cristina Romero, recently released her first book, a murder mystery, and says her motivation came during the time she took off from work during the pandemic.
It wasn't really until I took a creative writing course at the college I think it's about 15 years ago now. And that really sparked the writing. It was still slow going for a long time, but the pandemic was what gave me the boot that I needed, because I suddenly had so much time on my hands when the library here in Sterling closed, where I'd been working part-time. And I said to myself, this is it. This is your chance to finally write the book you've, been toying with in your mind. And I did. I sat down, and a few months later, I had a finished manuscript that I could send out.
Make sure you catch the full interview with author Cristina Romero and BCN producer Michael Clausen coming up later in our broadcast. The City of Edmonton and the province are working to expand shelter capacity after 6 people died in encampments since the cold weather began this fall. City Council approved $7.5 million to open a 200-space shelter in a West End hotel, but it won't be ready for another month. The province says 150 more shelter spaces are coming in addition to the 450 beds announced in October. The Hope Mission says 800 people have stayed in its shelters on Wednesday, and others have been housed at a mosque. Dozens of people gathered in Winnipeg outside the residence of a man who's been accused of killing 4 Indigenous women last spring. Family members and friends honored the women, who police say died between March and May. Jeremy Skibicki has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Marin, Rebecca Contois, and an unidentified woman. Skibicki was initially charged with first-degree murder in May and remained in custody after the partial remains of Contois were found in a garbage bin. The bodies of the 3 other women have not yet been found. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says he's worried that Canada could be moving too quickly into renewable energy without a proper backup plan. Moe says that growth will continue to be the North Star of the Saskatchewan Party government. The Premier says he felt disillusioned by Ottawa's decision-making when it comes to the resource sector. He says, however, that he will not be backing down. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced the beginning of site preparation for Canada's first small modular reactor. The nuclear reactor located near Darlington in the Durham region is expected to be completed by 2028.
Ontario's growing fast, and as I always say, over 300,000 people are showing up on our doorstep every year for the next 10 years. Every year, more people and businesses see the promise that Ontario holds. We need to find ways to meet the increasing demand for power and ensure that the families and businesses of this province can afford the electricity they depend on. We need to make sure that Ontario's power supply remains safe and reliable, all while keeping our carbon emissions low.
Canadian soccer fans say they're a little disappointed after Team Canada failed to win a game at the World Cup in Qatar. They are, however, holding out hope for a better result when Canada, the United States, and Mexico host the tournament in 2026.
Still proud of the team for making it this far. Like I said, I wish the results were a little bit different, but it was fun just to come out and get the experience of coming down to a local town square and getting to watch the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a nation, we're very proud that they've made it to the World Cup this year after 36 years wait. You know, it's definitely not the outcome we were hoping for. I think we were hopeful that we would come out of the group stage, but it's still a lot of monumental moments. You know, now we've seen 2 goals so far in the World Cup, and that's historical for our country. So, again, it's just a stepping stone for us, and then we're looking forward to 2026 World Cup back here in North America.
And you know, we can't wait to see some of that World Cup action here in Canada in 2026. Go Canada. Well, it was cold and snowy again today across much of southwestern Alberta, but fortunately, a big meltdown is on. A complete look at the weather forecast is coming up. Well, it appears as though things are going to be warming up tomorrow. A nice weekend is shaping up maybe for a barbecue. Angela Stewart is out in the field and has more of the weather details for us. Angela, it looks like a Chinook may be blowing in and heating things up just a little bit.
Yes, Hal, you are correct. Warmer temperatures and beautiful conditions are on the way for our region this weekend. So it is welcome news after the chilly weather that we experienced over the last few days. Mainly sunny tomorrow, our expected high 0, so a great day to get out and enjoy some of that sunshine. Sunday cooling down slightly to -3, that sunshine still sticking around. Monday cloudy skies and -13. Tuesday expect some periods of light snow with the high at -12. On Wednesday, temperatures improving 0 for the high and a mix of sun and cloud. Our average high this time of year is +1, so we are sitting well below that average. We are also well below our average low. The average low is -10. 15 degrees was the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 1941, with the lowest temperature at -32 back in 1950. The sun rose at 8:08 this morning and it's set at 4:34. Temperatures across the country now for Saturday, 5 degrees with winds near the Juan de Fuca Strait in Victoria, 5 degrees the high in Vancouver and clearing in the afternoon, -9 in Edmonton and sunny skies, beautiful conditions in Calgary, lots of sunshine, and -6 the expected high for tomorrow. Chillier conditions as we move east, Saskatoon -15 with a risk of frostbite. The wind chill -38 in the morning. Always remember to layer up if you are heading out, as that wind chill will be quite brutal. Mainly sunny in Regina, -16 with a risk of frostbite there too. That wind chill will make it feel more like -36. Mainly sunny and -15 in Winnipeg. Make sure to have your umbrella handy if you are in the central part of the country. Showers are expected in Toronto for tomorrow. 7 degrees for the high. Wet conditions in Ottawa as well. Showers and +8. The same picture in Montreal, 8 degrees for the high and rain. Fredericton, 11 degrees the high, and you guessed it, rainy conditions. Increasing clouds in Halifax with 12 degrees as the expected high. Charlottetown, 9 for the high and increasing clouds. +1 in St. John's for Saturday and sunny skies.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Today's jobs report from Stats Canada is fueling expectations that the Bank of Canada will raise its key interest rate again on Wednesday. The rate currently sits at 3.75%, but analysts say it could go up another quarter or a half a point, which would make it the highest rate since 2008. News that the economy added 10,000 more jobs last month supports the forecast for another rate increase, with the door open to another one in January. Economists say the economy has not turned around enough to start affecting inflation, so the central bank's policy rate will likely rise to about 4.5% early next year. A plant could be built near Calgary, with a second plant in Saskatchewan using canola oil in the production of aviation fuel. Alberta's Reconciliation Energy Transition develops a wide range of energy projects with Indigenous equity ownership. The company is reaching out to energy and agriculture companies about the potential of investing in this $600 million project. Clean fuel regulations require liquid fossil fuel suppliers to reduce the carbon intensity of the gas and diesel they produce and sell in Canada. Experts say canola is a big helper since it is an excellent feedstock for clean fuel. A final decision on the proposed aviation fuel plant from canola oil is anticipated by the summer of 2023. According to Stats Canada, Alberta grew 6.5 million acres of canola this year, while in Saskatchewan, that number was closer to 10 million. The technology behind electric vehicles has come a long way. Now, that's according to William York, who's the director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. York says when it comes to charging your EV, it's a lot quicker now.
In the early days of electric vehicles in the 2012 era, the most a battery could accept was about 100, 150 kilowatts. Now we're seeing batteries that can accept up to 350 kilowatts. Now, I realize this is electrical speak, so when you're at a fast charging station, that's the difference from staying there for about 30 minutes down to about 5 to 10 minutes. So the amount of time that you have to spend charging at a fast charger is going dramatically down.
William York will also discuss the range of electric vehicles during the colder winter months here on the prairies. That full Q&A is coming up after business news. Parkland announced that it is increasing the number of planned electric vehicle charging stations here in Western Canada from 25 to 50. The Calgary-based company says the ultra-fast charging stations will be located on highways and in major centres from Vancouver Island to Calgary. It says the new stations will be capable of charging most electric vehicle models within 20 to 30 minutes. Parkland says it has secured around $6.8 million in funding from Natural Resources Canada and the BC government to support its plan. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 39 points on the day to finish at 20,485. The Dow was up 34 points to 34,429. The S&P 500 was down 4 points on the day to 4,071, and the Nasdaq was down 20 points to 11,461. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.24 to $79.98 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 46 cents to $6.28 US. Gold was down $5.47 on the day to $17.9763 US an ounce, and silver was up 38 cents to $23.14 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.62 per bushel, barley's at $9.79, canola's at $19.02, and corn is at $11.60 per bushel. Live cattle were up 30 cents to $153.35. Feeder cattle January contract was up $1.38 to $182.45, and lean hogs were down 70 cents to $84.43. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.25 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the federal government announced that close to $10 million in funding will be going towards 16 projects aimed at helping Indigenous communities across Canada to reduce harms related to substance abuse. Having the discipline to write a novel is one thing, and getting published is something entirely different. Coming up, we shall chat with a Lethbridge author who recently wrote and released a murder mystery novel. Hear about that journey. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Come out and support the 26th Annual Canadian Tire, Teddy and Toque Toss at the NMAX Centre taking place Friday, December 9th. Enjoy an energetic hockey game between rivals the Lethbridge Hurricanes and the Medicine Hat Tigers. And on the first Hurricanes goal, throw a stuffed Teddy or Toque, which will be collected and given out to kids in need. Fans can visit both Canadian Tire locations in Lethbridge, and with a $15 Toque or Teddy Bear purchase, receive a free ticket to the game. Tickets can also be purchased at the NMAX Centre or online at lethbridgehurricanes.com. The Interfaith Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help in administration, the warehouse, and kitchen. The commitment is 3 to 4 hours once or twice a week. Through your help, you'll be providing food security in our community and enjoy a sense of purpose by serving others. For details on volunteering, contact Bill at volunteer@interfaithfoodbank.ca or by calling 403-320-8779. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Books have always been a great attraction for so many of us. I remember as a youngster spending many a glorious afternoon finding a new treasure to read at my local library. Even today, books are still not just an effective way to communicate ideas, but a great escape from a cold winter's night. One local author who's recently released her first book is Christina Romerl. She joins me now to talk about the life of an author in southern Alberta. Christina, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about your first release. It's called A Christmas Candy Killing. Can you give us the premise of this story?
Yes, Christmas Candy Killing is the first in the Killer Chocolate Mystery Series. It is set in gorgeous northwestern Montana at the foot of the Rocky Mountains in the fictional town of Harriston. Identical twin sisters, Alex and Hannah, own Murder and Mayhem mystery book and chocolate shop, and their line of killer chocolates are named after poisons that have names like strychnine strawberry. The twins and their rescue dog, Miss Watson, get embroiled in solving the murder of their friend, who happens to be a true crime fan. And the friend is murdered soon after mentioning that there's a killer featured on a true crime show that is now living in the village. So when Alex becomes a top suspect of the sheriff, Hannah insists that her twin needs to step in and find the real killer.
Wow. That sounds fascinating. And I love chocolate of all flavors, and I'm pretty sure some have attempted to plot my murder. How did you come up with this story idea?
When I submitted my manuscript to my agent, Dawn Dowdle, she suggested that it needed a stronger hook. Cozy mysteries revolve around a theme, and sometimes it's a library or a bookshop, and she said it needed something a little stronger. And so I just started racking my brains what it could be, and I love chocolate, and I finally settled on the whole idea of the poison themed chocolates, because I think it's fun to kill people with poison in my books. So
Gotcha. That's a little macabre, but that's good to know, just in case we're ever invited over to your house for a Christmas party or something. So this story is set just south of where we both live, at the foothills of the Rockies in Montana. How did you come up with this region as a backdrop for your story?
I really toyed with the idea of setting it here in southern Alberta, but the reality is, I think the US is obviously my main market, and a lot of people in the US like to read about places in the US. And because I love the Kalispell area so much, and we visit there regularly, it's so similar to Waterton. And so I thought I would just move the little community that I'd created just a little bit across the border. And of course, with mountains as the backdrop, you can never go wrong. Plus, I mean, there are more trees and lakes that give me more options in the mystery sense when I'm writing than Bald Prairie does.
Oh, that's for sure. So do you feel that you've maybe built a relationship with the cast of your book?
100%. I really do think of my characters as very real. And in fact, I often will speak to them when I'm writing, asking them, what would you do? And they do talk back to me.
That's really cool. So authors will often say that about the characters in their books, and sometimes those characters, they do something outside of what you were expecting as the writer. I know one writer that I worked with years ago on a few projects. We were working one day and he was totally stumped because his main character had climbed into a tree in a field and he couldn't find a way to get her out of the tree. Did you encounter any shenanigans like this from one of your characters?
100%. My main character, my protagonist, Alex, is far more serendipitous and impulsive than I am. And so she is often doing things that puts her at significant risk. And then, of course, I have to find ways to extricate her from these situations.
Well, that sounds great. So I've got to ask you, in A Christmas Candy Killing, did you have a character that you didn't like, but you left them in the story anyway?
Honestly, no. I love my characters. To be honest, the ones that are the nastiest or the quirkiest are the most fun to write, and so I really do enjoy all of them. It's a great place to kill off people if you want to have the bookish satisfaction of having someone taken care of that you might not like in real life, who you might kind of have a slight resemblance to that person in the book. But generally, I really do like my characters. They are, and like I said, the nastier they are, the more fun they are to write.
Gotcha. I can kind of understand that. Absolutely. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but maybe is there a summer camp Death by Chocolate in the works, perhaps?
No, there is no summer camp. Actually, book 2, so I have already written book 2. It's with my editor in the editing phase, and it is set at Christmas as well. So this will be an ongoing series set at Christmas. And so summer is just something we talk about in passing in these books. The fun part, of course, is talking about the chocolate and coming up with recipes for it. I will be, in fact, testing a recipe for book 2 today after the interview. So,
well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Anytime you get to eat chocolate, it's a good moment in the timeline of our lives. So I wanted to ask you, who is the target audience for this book?
Generally speaking, cozy mysteries have a demographic of women that are usually a little bit older, usually over 40. And we are seeing a bit more of a trend to younger protagonists and a younger audience. But by and large, my audience is women over 40, and I would even hazard more commonly over 50.
Oh, very interesting. Your career and background was in finance and banking, correct?
This is very true. I graduated from the college here in Lethbridge and went pretty much straight into a banking career. I started on kind of the operations side and then went into personal banking and finished off as a commercial banker.
Wow, that's very interesting. So you also have a blog, and is that your gateway into writing, or how did you get started?
I've wanted to write since I was a child, since I was in my teens. And it wasn't really until I took a creative writing course at the college I think it's about 15 years ago now. And that really sparked the writing. It was still slow going for a long time, but the pandemic was what gave me the boot that I needed. Because I suddenly had so much time on my hands when the library here in Sterling closed, where I'd been working part-time. And I said to myself, this is it. This is your chance to finally write the book you've, been toying with in your mind. And I did. I sat down, and a few months later, I had a finished manuscript that I could send out.
Well, that's great. That took a lot of dedication and probably research too. Do you think there's a difference from writing your blog post to tackling an entire book?
It is very different. Blog posts are fun. They're short. They you can write about, a variety of things. A book does take a fair bit of commitment. And there are times when you literally just don't want to slog through it, especially the first draft, where you're just getting the ideas on the paper. And it is amazing the excuses you can find to keep yourself from writing. But it is important and crucial to just keep at it, because once you get through that first draft, the magic really happens in the revising.
Wow. I'm sure that's a lot of encouragement to others out there. I do understand that there are many local writers in and around Lethbridge. Is there kind of a Alberta roundtable of authors, if you will?
I actually have written my books kind of in a bubble here by myself, but I am discovering that there are writers groups here in the area. McGrath has a writers group that meets at their library once a week. And I was just recently asked to participate in a panel at WordBridge, which is a writers conference in Lethbridge. And I know that there are some writers groups out of Calgary, and I suspect there are lots of small groups here in the area as well. It is a far more prolific community than I had originally thought.
So one thing I haven't asked you yet is how you got started with this particular book and storyline, and what was your motivation to cross that finish line?
This book, I had started it a couple of years before the pandemic. And I kind of did a boot camp weekend where I just took a couple days and just wrote and wrote. And at the end of that, I realized that my plot just wasn't quite right. And so I spent literally a couple of years toying with it, thinking about it. And then when the pandemic hit, that was my spark where, I thought I have no more excuses. And I just did it. I mean, it really was a matter of just committing myself to sitting there every day, putting in the time, getting the words on the paper. And like I said, first drafts are terrible, and you can't let that frighten you, because it really is when you go back and you revise over and over, and you're, on your 13th, 14th, 15th draft, that it starts to look like a finished book. And so for me, the motivation was just really just finally getting it done. And I mean, I have to be honest, it's been a fun thing to do. And now that I'm into the habit of it, I find I don't need to coerce myself into the writing as much anymore. I really look forward to those hours spent in front of the computer getting the words on the page.
Well, that's great. And like I've heard Owen Benjamin say, persistence is fertile. So you definitely persisted, and we have your book. And we actually have Penny Waris of Analog Books to thank for this interview, because she introduced me to your book this week and said that you got everything right. So could you talk maybe about the support you've received from others in our community on your quest to publishing this book?
Yes, absolutely. Penny has been wonderful. Penny is one of the owners of Analog Books here in Lethbridge. They opened during the pandemic. I did not even realize they were there until my publisher asked if there were any independent bookstores here in town, and I Googled and found them. And so I approached them about doing my book launch there, and they have been hugely supportive. I have appreciated all that they've done to help. Chapters as well in town, the manager there, Scott, he has been very supportive, and they've given me a huge amount of shelf space. So I'm very grateful for the community in Lethbridge helping to really support and advocate for my book. It's been great.
It's wonderful to have that community support. I wanted to ask you maybe if there was a mentor or there was a writer who was influential in your life getting to this point.
Honestly, I was a voracious reader. I've been reading mysteries specifically since grade 3. I started with the Trixie Belden series, and then moved on to Nancy Drew and Agatha Christie. And really, those were my mentors. I think I've read, I know I've read thousands of books, and many of them have been mysteries. And that has just planted in my mind, how to write. A lot of the process was intuitive, and I think it is just thanks to the great writing that's out there, and so many great writers still, bringing wonderful books into the world today.
That's great. So if our viewers want to find out more about you and your book, do you have a website that we could direct them to?
I do. My website is christinaromrell.com, and I do have a page that is dedicated to the books, as well as a blog, and of course, a contact page and a page where you can see what I'm going to be doing. So I have tomorrow a book signing in Montana in Great Falls at the Barnes & Noble.
Well, that sounds like fun. It'll be a great weekend, I'm sure, to be down in Montana. Christina, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us to talk about your book.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
It was our pleasure. That was Christina Romrell, author of A Christmas Candy Killing, and she joined us from her home just south of Lethbridge.
You know, with government environmental mandates, electric cars are becoming even more popular. One could even suggest that EVs are making a bit of a comeback, as electric vehicles were popular in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. In fact, Ferdinand Porsche designed the first electric drivetrain back in 1898. To talk about electric vehicles in Alberta, we're joined now by William York, Director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. William, welcome to Bridge City News.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, over 100 years ago, it was European and American companies which experimented and built electric vehicles. Today, where are we seeing the biggest innovations when it comes to electric vehicle technology? Where do you think that is?
I would say leader of the pack is Tesla, and they're an American-based company. But South Korea is also pretty advanced as well.
Is a lot of the environmental controls the governments are bringing forth, they want to cut back on emissions and pollution? Is that why we're seeing such a huge increase in the manufacturing of EVs?
I think it's a multi-pronged effect. Governments are certainly pushing for it, but Tesla and companies that are leaders in the innovation space in electric vehicles, they've made it compelling for consumers. So the performance advantages of electric vehicles is also what's driving it.
I like the pun on that, what's driving it. Now, you own an EV yourself, right?
Correct. Yeah, I became an EV owner in June of 2018. I acquired a Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive long-range unit, and I have about 85,000 pure electric kilometers driven on that thing since then. I've driven it all the way to Seattle. I've driven it to Lethbridge in -40 from where I live in Edmonton, Alberta. I drive it everywhere I possibly can. It's my family's favorite vehicle to drive. We have two vehicles. We prefer the electric vehicle over the gas-powered vehicle every day.
You know what? I'm glad you brought up about the -40-degree temperatures. Some people have concerns about the actual range with EVs, especially when you have to have your heater on for most of the time. So how much does that actually cut the range down? Does it go maybe from down to 700, down to 350? What have you experienced?
Yeah, so let me break it down for folks. When you drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, heat is a natural byproduct of the combustion cycle process. The combustion is only about 30% efficient, so the rest is waste heat. Now, in the wintertime, that's great because you need that heat, but in the summertime, that's just energy wasted. In an EV, it's different. All the energy required for the vehicle comes from the battery, and that's a very efficient process, but unfortunately, there's not much waste heat to take advantage of in the wintertime. So your battery does need to provide that heat. What we see in the worst of the worst in Alberta is a 40 to 50% range loss. So if you're driving a conventional EV with a 400 to 500 kilometer range, you're getting, in between 200 and 250 kilometers of range per charge. Now, thankfully, we don't get too many weeks of that extreme cold in Alberta, but I have driven my EV then, and the only issue that I saw was accelerated range loss. But other than that, they're fantastic winter vehicles. The heat comes out of them just like that, just like an electric hairdryer. The heat is almost instantaneous out of one of those, and same thing in an EV. And the traction control systems are fantastic because they have very high responsiveness and precision, and that's exactly what you want in an in a traction control system in the wintertime.
It's interesting. Some of my friends that own EVs, they actually have a combustion engine SUV that they use for driving in the wintertime. And then for the other 3 seasons, they drive their EV. So they much prefer that, they said. Now, can you describe how battery technologies maybe changed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, so every year battery energy density improves by about 5%, which means that the amount of energy that you can store in a same size battery pack improves by 5% every year. So the technology keeps improving in that way. If you're a follower of material science and electrical engineering, you'll see that there's lots of innovation and research going into new battery technologies and chemistries, lots of tinkering in the lab to see, hey, can we get a battery with more energy density or more winter resilience? So those are always being explored. I'm seeing that lots of EVs are getting much, much better at accepting power from a fast charging station. So, for instance, in the early days of electric vehicles in the 2012 era, the most a battery could accept was about 100, 150 kilowatts. Now we're seeing batteries that can accept up to 350 kilowatts. Now, I realize this is electrical speak. So, when you're at a fast charging station, that's the difference from staying there for about 30 minutes down to about 5 to 10 minutes. So the amount of time that you have to spend charging at a fast charger is going dramatically down.
So how does that differ if you plug your vehicle in overnight, get that long charge as opposed to fast charging?
So level 2 charging, or what you're referring to as long charging, is what you would typically do at your home, and that's using electricity that's basically what your stove or your electric dryer would use. It's 240 volts and about 30 amps. And like you said, that's good enough for overnight. So while you sleep, your car gets fully charged, even if it's fully depleted, which isn't often the case. When you're on the road, however, or if you don't own a garage, or you don't have access to that type of electricity, you would rely on what's called a fast charging station. Now, Lethbridge, as far as I know, has, I think, one fast charging station, but there are many in the surrounding area. In fact, southern Alberta is quite well covered with fast charging infrastructure, but you would use one of those to recharge if you were not able to have access to a level 2 charging station.
And does that give you a full charge?
Yes, it can.
Okay. I want to chat with you a bit about some of the charging stations, as you mentioned, because I haven't seen a lot of them. I have seen a few, you're right, but how long do you think it'll actually take for the infrastructure to keep up and we can see more of these charging stations across Alberta and the country for that matter?
Well, that is kind of a misconception. So because you can charge at home, you actually don't need as much public charging infrastructure as you do gas stations, because people can't refine gasoline in their home. They have no means of refueling their vehicle at home if they drive an internal combustion engine vehicle. So we are seeing tremendous growth in EV fast charging infrastructure, actually. Back when I was first tracking the space in 2017, there were only about 3 fast chargers in the Alberta region. Now there's well over 50 different locations. So the infrastructure has grown immensely. And there's a resource that folks can use called PlugShare. It's an app on your phone, or if you can use your laptop or computer to go to www.plugshare.com, and that'll show you all the charging stations available in Alberta, and there's much more than you think.
Kind of like Gas Buddy, when you get the app, it's like, oh, let's see where the gas stations are. And
Yeah, very similar. In fact, it even shows you the price, and many of these charging stations are free to use. And the reason for that is that businesses like IKEA will offer this as a value add service to their customers. So they're trying to lure customers from going to the Brick or some other furniture store to come to IKEA, get a little bit of a free charge, and buy something.
so, William, how would you convince somebody like me, old school, who loves my Mopar with the Hemi and that growl and that power? How would you convince me to get that electric vehicle that's so quiet and it freaks me out when I'm a pedestrian? All of a sudden, there's a vehicle right in front of me there. There's no real sound to it at all, and that power. So how would you convince somebody like me to make the switch?
Sure. So the fastest production cars on Earth now are electric. You can get an EV that will smoke any gas-powered vehicle on the road, and you'll spend, if you're looking at high-end vehicles, you'll spend about $100,000 less. So that's value proposition, right? Number one. If you like going fast, there's nothing faster than an EV. Value proposition number 2, whatever you spend on gasoline or diesel, take that and divide that number by 5 or 10, and that's what you'll end up spending in electricity. So if you like saving money, you can drive an EV. If you don't like spending a lot of money at the dealership on maintenance, you'll love driving an EV. There's no oil changes, there's no spark plugs, there's no alternator, there's no carburetor. all those maintenance costs are reduced. In the 4 years that I've owned my electric vehicle, all I've had to do is replace windshield wiper blades, washer fluid, and a couple cabin air filters. I haven't had to do any brake pad replacements due to regenerative braking. The maintenance savings are incredible.
But there is one big thing that you will have to replace. I've chatted with Tesla owners about this in the past, and that's the batteries after 8 to 10 years. And William, that's expensive. They were telling me they're fearful of the fact it'll cost them $10,000 to $15,000 to replace the batteries in this older EV. They say, you know what? It's not even going to be worth it. How do you respond to that?
Oh, it's too bad. You talk to uninformed Tesla owners. So, drivetrain warranties for Teslas are up to 8 years or 200,000 kilometers, whichever comes first. But that doesn't suggest that the battery needs replacement. In fact, that's not true. I know many Tesla owners with their batteries that are older than 8 years or 10 years old, and their batteries are still going strong. The reality is that the batteries are designed to outlive the body. Tesla batteries are rated for up to 500,000 miles or more. So that's unfortunate that you got bad information from those Tesla owners. They'll find that out though once their vehicle turns 8, 10 years old that their battery is still doing fine. Another thing about that too is that once their battery is no longer covered by warranty, that's a future date. And we all know that battery prices have been dropping precipitously. Back in 2012, battery pack costs were about $300 per kilowatt hour. And today they're well below $100 per kilowatt hour. And the floor is still much further away. As the supply chains ramp up, as battery manufacturers get better at manufacturing these batteries. So to say that their battery today costs $13,000 to $15,000, that may be true, but it's still covered under warranty. 8 years from now, it will no longer be. So if they do require a battery replacement, and I'm not saying that's the case, it will cost much less. And the best way to think about this is an engine on your gasoline vehicle. Those are very expensive to replace. Do they fail often? Not really. It's a very rare occurrence. It does happen, and it's unfortunate for those owners, but it's not a regular occurrence with gas vehicles, nor is it for the battery for an EV.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a gas vehicle replacement, for the motor would be between $5,000 or $6,000 for the average vehicle. If it's an 8-cylinder, 6s might be different, and 4 cylinders as well. But let's talk about the batteries themselves, William. Inside the EVs, they're heavy. Wouldn't that cause more damage to the maybe the front end components, to the suspension system, especially over time when we have a lot of potholes in our cities here in Canada?
Yeah. So it is true that the battery does weigh a bit. I was speaking earlier about the battery energy density improvements. So over time, the heaviness penalty, I guess you could say, will go away. There are advantages though to having a heavy battery. You have this heavy thing close to the ground, and that reduces the chance of a rollover. Makes your center of gravity very low, which prevents a rollover. Makes the handling of the vehicle very good. It also improves the front to rear balance ratio, weight balance ratio. So EVs have actually, due to the battery and its weight, excellent handling capabilities. And I know I did say earlier that they have less maintenance, but they're not immune to maintenance. So suspension components do wear out and they do require replacement. And we live in Alberta, there are potholes, so that is a significant risk.
Yeah.
But the suspension components are built for the weight of the vehicle. So the engineers at these companies, they design that into the suspension.
So I've got like I said, a Chrysler 300C with a Hemi motor in it. It's just over 4,000 pounds. How would you compare, let's say, a comparable Tesla, a full-size sedan, when it comes to weight?
So my car is about 4,000 pounds.
Okay, so it is comparable. Now, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz AG says his company is planning a new vehicle that will be an 800-volt class. How would this compare to the electric vehicles we're seeing right now in North America?
Oh, good question. So the 800-volt class is what he's referring to is the DC direct current bus architecture on the high voltage battery. The more voltage the battery can accommodate, usually the faster it can charge. So it's a good thing that the industry is moving this way. There are some pros and cons to that design architecture, but By and large, this means that Mercedes is making an electric vehicle that will be capable of very fast charging speeds, which means that when you're going on a road trip, let's say from Edmonton to Lethbridge, you'll have to stop for less of a duration for your vehicle.
William, I know in North Vancouver there's already a hydrogen filling station, and the Netherlands, a former gas pipeline producer, now carries hydrogen. Do you think that maybe EVs are just a stopgap measure between gas and diesel and hydrogen or ammonia as fuel sources?
No. So hydrogen vehicles globally, there's only about 100,000 units sold. Compared to electric vehicles, where over 30 million units have been sold. Electricity is far more common than hydrogen. We have electricity. I have electricity in the room I'm in right now. I have electricity at home. To get the same amount of hydrogen infrastructure would cost too much. And I don't think at the end of the day, you would see the fuel cost savings that you see with going electric. So I don't see hydrogen really taking off in the passenger vehicle space. And in fact, most vehicle OEMs are not producing hydrogen vehicles, nor are they putting much money into the research and development of them. I know some are, but by and large, it's going into electric drivetrains. I don't think it's a stopgap technology. I think it's going to be the technology of the future until something better comes along, let's say nuclear. But I think EVs are here to stay, especially in the passenger vehicle market. Heavy duty and medium duty vehicles, perhaps hydrogen has more of a place because of the weight and the range requirements of those vehicles. But for passenger vehicles, for folks like you and me, it's going to be electric for sure.
William York is the director of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. Thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.